Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 193 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Dominic Aragon here with you as we got plenty to discuss after Bubba Wallace gets the win at the Brickyard this past weekend. And now we will turn our attention in the NASCAR Cup Series to the final stretch before the NASCAR playoffs as we head to Iowa this weekend. Iowa Speedway hosting the Iowa Corn 350 powered by ethanol. We'll preview that race and more. Also break down the playoff picture and everything you need to know coming up here on today's show. Dominic joins in right now. Dominic, Bubba Wallace, first black driver to ever win on the Indy Oval in any motorsports series. He was able to hold off Kyle Larson, arguably the greatest driver in the world, and did it, with not much gas in the car and older tires and all that. Biggest moment of Bubba Wallace's career so far. And you think about not just that, but with the whole 2311 lawsuit, with Front Row over the charter situation and losing their charters. And Denny had won the week prior. I mean, this has been a big couple of weeks for 2311, for Bubba Wallace, for Denny Hamlin and company, what we've seen go down.
And they put a full race together. We've seen Bubba Wallace run up front a lot this year. I think of Homestead, I think of Las Vegas, some really good opportunities. And they had really been stage pointing the field to death, but they had not gotten that victory, that elusive victory that guarantees them a playoff position. And also, too, worth noting, third career win, but the first time in Bubba Wallace's career that he has won a Cup Series race during the regular season. Because recall, he won Talladega in 21, but it was already in the thick of the playoffs. Kansas, the same thing the next season. But breaking that 100 race winless streak, we knew he was capable, Tyler. I think we've even picked him a time or three on the show in that span since to go out and win a race when we do our pick'ems every week because we know how fast those 2311 cars unload off the trailer. But a full race and to survive the rain, the overtime, the second overtime, the impending fuel mileage, he had enough fuel to do a burnout. So he could have probably gone a little bit more, but really, really cool to see Bubba Wallace finally get that first win in 3 years and honestly shut up a lot of his haters because we know how fast he is. We know how good he is, but to see him put a complete race together, that's got to boost your confidence.
I look at Bubba Wallace, Dom, and, this being his third win, he's been in the playoffs before. He's ninth in points right now. I think that Bubba is what he is. He's never going to be a championship caliber driver, but he's not a bad driver either. And if you can just accept that reality here, I think that's okay for Bubba Wallace and where 2311 is at right now as an organization. That's a team that, they've improved a lot and they've taken some big steps forward, but they are not as an organization better than what Bubba Wallace is talent wise. I think you look at Trackhouse, for example. I think that's part of the reason why they're moving on from Daniel Suarez now is that they have exceeded Daniel Suarez's talent level, which wasn't the case for a long time. 2311 and Bubba Wallace, I think, are a good fit for now with where Bubba and with 2311 are at right now in their respective careers and timelines.
I don't know. That might be selling his talent level short. You get the right team, you get the right crew chief, you have the right pieces around you. It's just a matter of putting full races together. And maybe we see him break out in the playoffs. We haven't seen that yet, but we have seen him finish top 10 in points. We've seen him make the playoffs. Now you've got this momentum that you're riding into the postseason here in 4 or 5 weeks. There's some really good things coming out of that 2311 camp. And with all the distractions and the noise of the lawsuit and all of the things that are going on off track, I think it's a great time to be 2311 racing outside of the lawsuit stuff, which we'll get into later. But even Denny Hamlin said in his post-race comments, if he couldn't win the race, this is the next best thing.
Yeah, big win for him getting that done. And I mean, the you think about too, just the aspect of him, Dom, beating Kyle Larson of all people there, with as good as Kyle is, with being the defending race winner. I think this should silence a lot of critics for Bubba Wallace to do what he did, to go out there and earn this, to do this at the Brickyard in Indianapolis here. I mean, I was super impressed with Bubba Wallace. To me, this is of all the things he's done in his NASCAR career, this was his biggest moment, I thought.
Certainly, when he won that, or when he finished second in Daytona in 2018, up until that first win at Talladega, that was probably his biggest moment, biggest stage of the sport. You got a great finish. I remember being in that media center and seeing him come in and just bawling his eyes out and just the tears of joy. You would have thought he had won the race. And to see that emotion, that raw emotion at the start finish line on Sunday during the interview and asking for his wife and son, and they got to come celebrate with him. Bubba Wallace really does keep it real. You want to talk about drivers that are honest and wear their emotions on their sleeve? He certainly does. And to be able to relish that victory, just enjoy it. Really, really cool storyline. And I love that end of that interview with Marty Snyder there. How many races has it been since my last win, or how many days? And oh, what he gave a number? No, zero. Really good way to cap it all off. And the defending race winner heading into Iowa this weekend. Again, there's got to be a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement around that camp, getting ready for the playoffs.
Oh, no doubt about it. We'll talk about Iowa coming up in just a bit, but let's begin with taking a look at the updated NASCAR playoff picture at this point. We only have just 4 races to go before we determine the full field of 16 drivers competing for the championship. And here's what we're looking at right now. Now that Bubba Wallace has won, that is one less playoff spot up for grabs, as we have 13 drivers locked into the field with Chase Elliott, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, Chase Briscoe, Bubba Wallace, Joey Logano, Ross Chastain, Austin Cindric, Josh Berry, and Shane Van Gisbergen. Then the 3 spots right now in points. Tyler Reddick, 138 above the cutoff. Alex Bowman, 63 above the cutoff. And Chris Buescher, 42 above the cutout. And on the outside looking in, Ryan Preece, 42 out. Kyle Busch, 81 out. Ty Gibbs, 95 out. And A.J. Allmendinger, 124 points out. And then there's, of course, many others as well. So, Dom, looking at the point situation, let's start with the 3 above. I think with Reddick, Bowman, and Buescher, the 3 of them, if it comes down to points, they're in really good shape. It's going to be hard to make up that many points in 4 races. Is it possible? Yes. Is it impossible? No. But it would appear they're in good shape, at least on the points end of things. But just like we saw last week, a Bubba Wallace winning and clinching a spot in. And then, we have some wild card races here coming up before the playoffs begin with Watkins Glen and Daytona. I don't think these 3 guys can necessarily feel comfortable for certain unless they get into victory lane. Tyler Reddick has a little more wiggle room, but you just never know.
Yeah, the point situation is going to be very, very interesting to follow. Tyler Reddick had said it at Sonoma a couple weeks ago. Don't really feel safe. You have to win. You have to go win to feel really safe about this. And now there's more pressure. You've been knocked down another notch on the playoff grid with your teammate winning. Good for 23-11, not necessarily good for Tyler Reddick himself and their team, but their point situation seems really, it kind of reminds me of Martin Truex and Ryan Blaney from a few years back in 2022, where they were 5th, 6th, 7th in points, could potentially miss the playoffs, and we did see Truex miss it. So if it comes to a situation where we get new winners, maybe you are in trouble. But 13 winners in the first 22 races, that is a lot. But we're going to Iowa, which we saw Penske and Hendrick Motorsports dominate last year. That could be out of play. But then you have a Watkins Glen, you have a Daytona. Tyler Reddick can win at any of these tracks that are coming up. So Reddick's probably in good shape, but you're Alex Bowman, you're Chris Buescher, you're probably not feeling good. You probably feel good that you're on the other side of the playoff cut line, but somebody like a Ty Gibbs or a Kyle Busch could go win over the next 4 weeks, or a Carson Hocevar, who's shown a lot of speed, could do the same thing. And it just disrupts that playoff picture as well. Because you are going to have some good caliber drivers that are going to miss the postseason. Ryan Preece comes to mind at this point, having a career year, but that career year may not include a postseason visit.
Yeah, let's talk about the guys on the outside. Ryan Preece, 42 back. Kyle Busch, 81 back. Ty Gibbs, 95 back. And A.J. Allmendinger, 124 back. Points going to be tough to come by. They're going to need basically one of these guys like Buescher or Bowman to crash out and finish in the back of the field early in a race and not get stage points, and hope to be up front and make up a ton of ground from there, and then still have more work to do after that. So that's part of that when it comes to points. But realistically, the focus needs to be on getting a win. If you're Priest, Bush, Gibbs, Allmendinger, and these guys, it's about getting back to victory lane. And if you're AJ Allmendinger specifically, I know that we're at Iowa this week, but with Watkins Glen coming up, I think if you're AJ Dom, you have to go into Watkins Glen with a must-win approach that you have to win that race to pretty much make the playoff. I think that that's his mindset. If you're Kyle Busch, you're probably looking at Watkins Glen and Daytona, and really any of these other races for that matter. These are must-win races. I think that you take some chances, whether it's gambling on strategy, whatever it may be. The next few weeks are just straight up must-win scenarios for these guys.
Yeah, you're going to have to approach those races like that. And we saw Kyle Busch step up last year because they were in a similar spot where he had the second place finish at Darlington and Daytona. It just wasn't enough, though, to be able to go out and make the postseason. And he missed the playoffs for the first time since, what was it, 2012? So, and we're looking at 2 straight years of Kyle Busch missing out on the postseason. It doesn't sound right, Tyler. It really doesn't. And we know that Kyle Busch is a very capable driver, and Richard Childress Racing is a capable team, but they're just not in the best spot right now to be able to do that. But a win fixes a lot of things, as David Starr likes to say. Winning fixes a lot of things. And that can be the case for even somebody like a Brad Keselowski, who he seems to have gotten his footing the last 6 to 8 race weekends, and that team is starting to gel. Keselowski gets something done too at a Daytona, at an Iowa. That six team is looking what they looked like all of last year. It just took them half the year to get going.
Yeah, and we've seen, Chris Buescher run up front. Ryan Preece has improved. Like RFK Racing as a whole, like it kind of got off to a slow start, but now we're starting to see them put it together. But still waiting to get into victory lane for the first time as an organization this year as well. But they're showing the week by week improvement. I'll say this: you mentioned Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch, both kind of in similar boats. And Dom, I think that one thing I would look at with both of them, yes, they are not in as good of an organization as what they've been earlier in their careers, with Brad K leaving Penske and going to RFK, and with Kyle Busch leaving Joe Gibbs Racing, go to RCR. But I do think Father Time has caught up with both of them as well. I don't think it's just solely due to a result of them being with lesser organizations and not having things figured out. I think that these guys, their age has kind of caught up to them to an extent of, I think it's a combination of both. And I think that people are quick to blame, that the organizations that they run for. But I mean, as the saying goes, Father Time's undefeated here. Maybe not with Denny Hamlin and what he's been able to do week in and week out, but I think it would be, I think it'd be incorrect to solely blame that their performance, their struggles, or not being up to the standard of what they were previously is solely on their teams. I do think that age has caught up to these guys a bit.
It could certainly be a factor on that. But yeah, the counter to that, and you brought it up, would be Danny Hamlin, and you have somebody who's the oldest full-time driver in Cup, and also with arguably one of the best, if not the best organization right now with the field, and he's going out and being a threat every week. So you put Keselowski in a car like that, or Kyle Busch, who was in a car like that for 15 years. I think that fixes a lot of it. But you're right, time does progress drivers, and maybe Hamlin's working harder at it too. I think that's a lot. All these guys work hard. Don't get me wrong, but I think Denny Hamlin might be putting in that extra mile to make sure he is staying on top of his game. So hard to say. Hard to say without knowing if they're in the same car. They're not in the same car. They're not in the same equipment. But without being able to have that same sample size or control, whatever you want to call it,
Well,
it's
here's why I
really
feel
hard to
comfortable
say.
saying that, because Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch were in the same organization just a few years ago, and Denny was clearly outrunning Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch was not winning the races that he was even back then.
He had a struggle in 2020, and in 2022 he only won the Bristol Dirt Race because the two in front of him, Reddick and Bush and Briscoe, had wrecked out. He won 2020 at Texas because of a fuel mileage gamble, but he was still running up front. Maybe not like Hamlin, but Hamlin has come alive the last few years, and we haven't seen that here with Kyle Busch as of late, or with Brad Keselowski. But again, we don't know for sure, but it could be a combination of factors. You can't rule that out either.
Yeah. The in-season challenge goes to Ty Gibbs, taking down the other Ty. Ty Dillon in
It was all
about,
tied up, Tyler.
yeah,
Entering the final race, all tied up.
yes. I thought you were going to call me Ty there. You built that up, with all the ties in there, and then you left me out.
Missed opportunity. Yeah.
Yes, missed it. Bad job by you, Dan.
Nice.
But nonetheless, Ty Gibbs gets it done. This is the biggest achievement, I think, of his career. I'd say that's bigger than his Xfinity championship is doing this. And kind of we talked about at the beginning of the year, Dom, just how bad he looked. And he's been running so much better as of late. He's still on the playoff bubble trying to get in. But this to me, I think is huge for Ty Gibbs to win this thing, to be running so much better the last few weeks. Something that they have to be excited about. Now the next step for him, even if they don't make the playoff here, he's got to find a way to get into victory lane before the end of the season. He's running better, but that's the next statement. I would say that's even bigger for him than making the playoff at this point, is getting into victory lane before the end of the year.
You're going to need to. This is your third full-time year now running for your granddad's organization. And had it been someone else, we would have probably been cut out already. We saw them quickly get rid of Eric Jones and Daniel Suarez, who had been, in my opinion, doing better at this point than in Ty Gibbs' situation. But we're not there making that call on that. And I know there's other layers to that situation too. But Ty Gibbs needs to get a victory. He needs to, again, we're talking about haters and shutting up the critics, and the haters, a win would do that. Ty Gibbs has shown the speed. I know you weren't sold on him at the beginning of the year. I probably wasn't either. But that team looks in trouble. That organization looks in trouble. You got Chris Gabehart at the helm. They look like they're starting to gel a lot better. Could be a little too late for a playoff position run without a victory. But we have seen Ty Gibbs show some promise over the last few weekends and in a variety of tracks with road courses and the mile and a half. But a win needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see if they can find a way to get the job done here as far as that goes over the coming weeks ahead. Some other notes to get to real quick. I want to touch on with the Xfinity side this past week. Connor Zilisch gets it done, and Junior Motorsports gets their 200th, or they're not the 200th, their 100th win in the Xfinity Series. And then you also had the uh, suspension to Austin Hill, and he could potentially lose playoff points. He's appealing that part of it. But those two things, Dom, real quick, your thoughts on what happened on the Xfinity side. Big deal for JRM. That's a huge accomplishment, for that organization and their commitment they've shown to the Xfinity Series. With only running one Cup race, I think that JRM's been huge for the Xfinity Series, to be arguably the flagship team of the series. I think they're the flagship standalone team of the series, and to get that done. And Connor Zilisch has been fantastic. I know he's talked about running the Indy 500 and all this. His future's bright. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
But and then the suspension for Austin Hill, was it justified? Give me your thoughts on those two things.
Man, yeah, lot to unpack there. But yeah, the 100th win, milestone victory for JR Motorsports. And to think this is a team that had been birthed out of force because of all the different factors that happened in the mid 2000s. And Callie Earnhardt with her business savvy and Dale Earnhardt Jr. with his name recognition, they've built a certainly legacy team in the Xfinity Series, and a team that you'll never be able to talk about the NASCAR Xfinity Series without mentioning JR Motorsports and all the drivers that had won with the organization, from Dale himself, Jamie McMurray, Elliott Sadler, Justin Allgaier, a lot of great names, Kevin Harvick, a lot of drivers that have sealed the victory. I believe Mark Martin was their first win at Las Vegas in 2008. So to see where that team has come over the years, really, really cool and really special. And Connor Zilisch, of course, capping it off. That's going to be a win that he remembers and the organization remembers for a long time. But that incident with Austin Hill and Eric Almirola with a few laps to go, man, if you're going to try to make it look like an accident, that's not to wear white gloves, because you can see that through the windshield. I will say that. That's
Yeah,
probably the best thing I saw on social media all weekend, Tyler. You're going to try to make it look like an accident. I don't know. The white gloves made it look very, very obvious. And when you have drivers calling that out on the spot in the booth, like they were on Saturday, NASCAR making that call really quick, you can say whatever you want about it. You can call it how it is. You can think you can try to convince yourself, but actually seeing how that played out, that looked intentional as it gets.
Well, and I think of it this way, like you put it in football terms, Dom, like so NASCAR's made it very clear. And there's been one of the few things they've been consistent about. Do not right hook under any circumstance. That is a no-go. That is a safety issue. That is very dangerous. Do not do that whatsoever. And you put it in like football terms, for example. If I grab, they changed the rule in the NFL a few years back, where if I grab the face mask, it doesn't matter if it was intentional or not. It's a 15-yard penalty either way. And they used to have the 5-yard incidental penalty. I'm sure you remember that, Dom.
Oh yeah.
And then they had the 15-yard intentional. And then what they figured out was, well, we can't really determine what is intentional or not. We're just going to call everything 15 yards, and you just got to, not pull the face mask. NASCAR's been very clear. Do not right hook. Do not do this. Um, I feel the same way, kind of like I do with a face mask. I don't care if it's intentional or not. This is something that NASCAR has to lay the hammer down on and be consistent with. And I think they made the right call here with the suspension for Austin Hill. Whether he meant to do so or not, they had to do what they had to do because safety's got to remain a priority.
And RCR is not going to fill the suspension. Austin Dillon's going to fill in that car this upcoming weekend at Iowa. And that's a big playoff implication because one of the caveats is yes, you do get a playoff waiver because you're missing a race, but you've been reset to zero with all your playoff points. Those get scrubbed from the board. And Hill had earned 21 playoff points to this point, and he was in a position where he might have been able to maybe take that second seed or the first seed, I should say, because Connor Zilisch has that right now with 23 points, but Austin Hill's going to enter the playoffs with pretty much like how a driver would on points with no stage wins, no victories, just on points alone. So that's a big hit to that team too. So man, they're talk about implications. This goes beyond the Indianapolis incidents. This has ripple effects. So this like you say about the 15-yard penalty with the face mask thing, this has repercussions and this has consequences beyond the incident itself. And it's going to make drivers really think. Austin Hill has just been made an example of with this. And hey, you're thinking of doing this. Not only will you be affected and have to miss a race, this also affects your team's playoff run too. So there's a lot at stake. There's a lot to lose. Hill had a lot to lose with this. Man,
Yeah.
big blow to their playoff run.
Yeah. All right. Let's get news and notes, our top headlines in the sport. Where do we want to start, Tom?
Man, lot to get to, but I think the first one we got to start with is NASCAR driver Stuart Friesen and his crash. He's in serious but stable condition at the time of this recording, but Stuart Friesen was injured Monday night, July 28th, in a big block modified crash at the Autodrome Drummond in Canada. While racing into turn three, Friesen's car went wide, hit the outside wall, caught some air, and flipped multiple times. After hitting the wall and catching fire, his car was hit by another before he finally came to rest. He was transported to a local hospital, but not after almost nearly a 30-minute type of extract. I think it was 30 minutes it took to get him out of the car, more or less. And he confirmed he was alert and talking, but nonetheless, he ended up suffering an unstable and open book pelvic fracture, which essentially means that his pelvis was broken in at least two positions, and with a large hematoma in the area and a fractured right leg. Yes, Stuart Friesen, our thoughts and prayers are with him and his speedy recovery. He's going to be out for a while without question, but nonetheless, a very violent wreck. If you haven't seen that, man, it was a tough one to look at. It looked very scary, and man, a very interesting situation with how all that played down.
Yeah, it was very scary. I'm glad to see that he's going to be okay. And I know there's going to be some critics saying, why was he running this type of race and all this? Um, these guys are all racers by nature. They do all sorts of stuff. It was a freak accident. I don't think
It was.
it's, he's to blame here, and I don't think, that it should be reason to be upset at him for doing this. The main thing is he's okay, that he's going to be fine here. And he's a very good driver. He's done a really good job in the truck series over the years, and hopefully he can move past this and make a full recovery here.
Yeah, and gosh, when you look at the competition side of things and the fact that they were going to be making the playoffs, and I think both, of course, they can run for owners points and stuff too. But gosh, an injury like that's not gonna that's gonna be a long recovery. And I don't know, some of the medical sources I've talked to have said that this could be like a 6 to 8 month type of recovery. So this could affect him going into next year. And man, like thankfully, no spine or head or neck injuries that were reported with that all those came back okay. But he's got a long road to recovery. I know he's going to be transferred to New York later in the week to I think undergo more surgery or to undergo surgery. So it's a long road to recovery, but when you look past all that, Tyler, and the situation out the 52 team is in the truck, and who do you bring in? Who do you bring in to fill in with that ride and the team in the owner's position to be able to run for the owner's championship? They got to be thinking that. I know there's contingency plans in place with every team in situations like that, and we're gonna have to see that enacted with the Halmar Friesen team here. And it'll be a very interesting fall in the competition. So of course, the safety and the recovery is what we're focused on with Stuart Friesen, but then eventually racing returns and where that's all headed. So a lot to break down and a lot to analyze with all that. They're in a very tough spot.
Yeah, they are. They are. What else we got, Tom?
Looking ahead to the NASCAR race weekend at Iowa, the Truck Series is off, but you have
Wait,
the
wait, wait. What about the Chicagoland news?
Oh, okay, okay. Well, yes, you have Chicagoland off the schedule according to reporting from Jordan Bianchi. So thank you for helping me there. But it looks like Mexico City is not returning to the schedule in 2026, at least at this time. Potential for that to come back maybe at some point, but it will not be on the schedule in 2026 per reporting from Jordan Bianchi of The Athletic. You have Chicagoland Speedway, which has been off the schedule now for 7 years, with the opportunity to come back to the schedule in 2026. The full NASCAR schedule has not been released for next year, and that is a year-to-year thing. It's never released around the same time. But Ben Kennedy, on a conference call with NASCAR reporters with the San Diego call last week, had said that the 2026 schedule would be out in the coming weeks.
Um, so two things as far as Mexico City losing its date. I don't think it's an indictment on Mexico City at all, actually, which most of these when a track loses a race, it is an indictment on the event and the ticket sales and all that. I mean, they had a great crowd there. It was a great atmosphere, but it's just a logistics thing where the teams are saying, yeah, we don't really feel like going from, you know, Mexico City and Michigan and Pocono and all that. Like it's too much travel for a week span and trying to figure that out with getting a bye week in there. I mean, it's just a lot. And I think logistically they couldn't make that work for now. However, I do see that Mexico City getting back on the schedule relatively soon. I think it could just be a year off this year. Maybe they make it work in 2027. There's all been some rumblings about maybe making an IndyCar doubleheader weekend out of it, and maybe that could help with attendance and maybe that could also help with travel costs potentially, especially since you have teams like Penske that run in both sports. Hendrick, of course, has a partnership with Aaron McLaren. Maybe you can make that work. So with all that said, like Dom, when it comes to Mexico City, we'll talk about the Chicago end of things here in a moment. Mexico City, I think it's not goodbye, it's see you later.
I like that. It's not goodbye. It's see you later. It's a potential for the schedule to bring it back at some point. And we've seen NASCAR be willing to change up the schedule. Like we had talked about on the show last week, Tyler, NASCAR has added a new track to the schedule in each of the last 7 seasons or last 6 seasons and last seven out of the last eight. And they've been known to flex things and move things around. We didn't see that in the mid 2010s. We know NASCAR is willing to try new things. So yeah, it's not a tombstone here. Mexico City's off the schedule forever. I do see it returning at some point as well, but there were lessons learned, I think, over the last few weeks, and the logistics, I think, were the biggest issue that the teams had. You go from Michigan to Mexico City and having to be at the Texas border to cross over at a specific time. I know a lot of that was a lot of difficulty for a lot of the teams to be able to do that. So I think once they work out the logistics with that, that'll probably make things a little easier. And if you have a doubleheader weekend with IndyCar, I think that is going to be certainly worthwhile too. You showcase the two top motorsports in the United States on a world stage like that. Everyone's going to win.
Yeah, that'd be great to see. I don't think that we're done with Mexico City. They just have to figure some stuff out to make that work long term. Uh, I do I do hate it that you're probably not going to have an international race next year, though. But with that said, like you don't have to go to the same tracks every year. I think we have this idea in mind, like, man, you know, we got to be racing at this track and these dates and these specific times. You don't have to do that. Nobody said you have to go to the same tracks every year. I like some variety and finding what works, what doesn't work, and mixing things up. I want us to go to Montreal at some point here soon. It doesn't look like that's going to happen in 2026, but maybe down the line we'll see. Meanwhile, Chicagoland back on the schedule, Dom. And I think this makes a ton of sense. You look at the Chicago street course, and I would say it was a successful event, but much like we talked about Mexico City, just a lot of logistical issues with that. Now you stay within that market, although it's not the same as the street course. And the street course, also another one that's kind of on pause. I don't think the street course has gone away completely just yet. But with how well the next gen does on mile and a halves, Chicago's sister track is Kansas Speedway, which is arguably one of the best tracks in the circuit right now. And you got that older racing surface and everything. To me, this just makes a lot of sense to go back to Chicagoland Speedway, and I would expect to see some great racing here.
Oh, it's going to be awesome. The mile and a half seems to be the bread and butter of the next gen vehicle, and we're getting that treat again after, like I said, a 5, 6 year absence of this vehicle of this track not being on the schedule. And you talk logistics too. You don't have to build a racetrack. You have the racetrack here already built up. You just got to renovate a few things, I'm sure, and I'm sure that's already well underway with it being a NASCAR owned property.
Yeah. So now you have San Diego, which you guys talked about. I was off last week. I think that's going to be a fantastic event.
Did you see
Uh,
that announcement video, man? That had to be one of the coolest announcement videos I have ever seen. The fact they kept that under wraps the way they did. We were praising NASCAR on that one last week on the panel.
it was a job well done. It was very well executed. Between that and running Chicago here and other mixes up to the schedule, I think the schedule is going to be just fine for next year.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I'll say this. We talked about, I mentioned the NFL example. Every year when you get the NFL schedule release, there's anticipation because the great unknown. Now that we're looking, Dom, every year of this schedule changing, of something being fresh, for the longest time, all the races were locked in. It was the same tracks every single time. I do love that we're having this discussion every year of the great unknown. What is going to change this year? To me, that's good for the sport.
That's good, and it keeps everyone on their toes. And I think, yeah, NASCAR and motorsports are completely different from ball and stick sports, but it's never the same schedule twice with all the other sporting leagues. So it's kind of cool to see that there's a little bit of a mix up here. Like we're seeing Homestead as the finale next year. We're going to see the addition of San Diego, and it keeps things fresh and exciting too. And I think from a fan standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, you're going to have your staples where you have two races here at Martinsville and Phoenix and whatever tracks are going to be on the schedule. We get that, but you're also getting a little variety too. That's pretty cool. It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, now the race preview that you have been waiting for.
That I've been waiting for, that I got rudely interrupted on, but rightfully so, because that was very newsworthy that we had to get to. Looking ahead to this weekend, there are two co-favorites, Tyler at plus 450. Who do you think are the co-favorites for the Iowa race this weekend?
I'm gonna go Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson.
You got one of them, Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell are your odds-on favorites entering as of Monday, July 28th in the opening odds from the Caesar Sportsbook, looking ahead at the race at Iowa this weekend for the Iowa Corn 350. You have 37 entries. Joey Gase is the notable part-time entry in the Garage 66 car for Carl Long and their team. But looking throughout the odds list, Ryan Blaney, last year's winner, plus 500. Denny Hamlin, your leader of victories in 2025 at plus 650. William Byron at plus 1,000. Chase Elliott and Joey Logano each at plus 1,200. Tyler Reddick at plus 1,400. Chase Briscoe at plus 1,600. Josh Berry plus 2,000. Chris Buescher plus 2,200. Ross Chastain plus 2,800. Kyle Busch plus 30,000. Brad Keselowski plus 3,300. Ty Gibbs at plus 3,500. And you look at some of the long shots down the list. Your longest shot at Joey Gase at plus 250,000. But you look throughout that, Tyler, and there are some good value picks there. If you are a gambling man, which, let's face it, everyone gambles, right? At some point, there are some good odds to be picked. They're not gambling advice, by the way, but certainly some good choices throughout there. Who do you like this weekend?
I like Denny Hamlin this week. I think that Denny's got something figured out. He's in his bag, as the kids would say. Denny Hamlin is the guy I'm watching for this weekend. How about you?
Looking at that list and seeing all the drivers, I think Denny Hamlin, I gotta back you up on that one. I think there's just something different about it. The last 2 years, he seemed to cool off at this point in the year. He's heating up. There's a different Denny Hamlin racing right now. That Mexico City break was maybe what he needed.
James Dennis Hamlin is
Denny Hamlin.
kicking it in gear. Yeah, he's the guy to beat right now.
Is he
And
gonna pull a John Elway here, man, or a Bobby Allison and win some titles at the end of his career? That's a whole other side quest here, but things just feel different.
it does. He's got it figured out right now. And the way that he's run on shorter tracks too, I know that he's been unlucky at Phoenix in the past, but I actually think based on the way they've done on these mile tracks and less, Phoenix could actually be a good place for them
Yeah.
if they get in the Final Four. So we'll see. And his teammate won there earlier in the year, so they got good notebook already to potentially work with there. So we'll see. Let's get to our mailbag segment this week. You can submit questions to us. David Star Podcast, gmail.com, Star Podcast on X and Facebook. Feel free to send us in your questions and we'll react to them. And appreciate you for sending those each and every week here on the show. First question. This comes from Webb. Webb wants to know, which current NASCAR driver do you think has the best shot at becoming a multi-time champion like Joey Logano or Kyle Busch, and why? Let's start with you. Who is somebody that's not a multi-time champion? So by that definition, they could be a one-time champion or no championships at all and be a multi-champion. Who's got the best shot, you think?
Man, great question. I think immediately who comes to mind, both drivers have not even won a championship yet, but they have a lot of racing left in their careers. I think two names here, Christopher Bell and William Byron. They have the potential to do that. Now, potential and doing are two different things, but they all have the right materials in their toolboxes to go get that done. Multi-win seasons every year. We see the speed out of them more often than not, week in and week out. Christopher Bell reminds me a lot of like a Mark Martin, Tyler, with the respect he has for his competitors. The years beyond his age and maturity, they just need to put the pieces together to win a championship. And I think he's going to rip off a few once that happens. William Byron has that potential as well. But those two names come to mind.
How do you not mention Kyle Larson?
That's the easy one, man. You can't go
Okay,
with
fair,
hanging fruit. Come on.
fair enough. Okay. I think Kyle's going to win at least two or three championships in his career, two or three more championships in his career. I believe he's the best driver in the world. He very well could win the title this year potentially, but I do think Kyle Larson is one. I know that he hasn't done great in the next gen car, but I still think he's a talented race car driver, and he's got a lot of time left. I know his dad only won one title, but Chase Elliott still got potential to get another two. He might not win two or three more titles. It's a good chance that before it's all said and done, Chase Elliott gets one more title here. I think that's a very realistic possibility. I like who you mentioned, Bell and Byron. Those are two good names, I think, as far as that goes. I think Blaney also has a chance to get one more before it's all said and done. I think we've kind of covered our bases here. Is there anyone you think we're potentially missing?
You keep this playoff format and the way they do it in even years. What about Joey Logano retiring as like a five-time champion? What if he wins two more titles? It very well could happen. You can't rule that out either.
Yeah, it could. He's got the format figured out.
Oh, he does. He does. Like how Johnson did in the late 2000s and into the early 2010s, and having that style of playoff racing figured out. Logano and Paul Wolf have something figured out with this.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, next question this week comes from Ferris. Ferris wants to know, do you agree with the current playoff format, or would you change it to make the championship battle more exciting or fair? This has been a big water cooler discussion the last week or so of what to do about the NASCAR playoff. Dom, I have a full format. I sent this to Dom, and he didn't even respond to me. He ghosted me. He blew me off. I fixed the playoff, and he didn't even give me any feedback whatsoever on it. So we're going to have this discussion now, Dom.
Okay,
Uh,
I want to. Yeah, you know what? It was a good format. I want you to share that with everybody.
okay. Oh, so now you're telling me it's a good format. Okay, I
I
see.
don't necessarily agree or disagree with it, but I do like the thought you put into it.
Okay. All right. So now I'm hearing Dom's opinion for the first time. I wrote this all out for him. He didn't even text me back. Um, so
Sounds like
here's
something I would do.
here's my idea. And I actually have a slight change compared to what I told you before. So the emphasis on winning, I think the race winner should earn 25 plus points over the second place finisher in just total points, right? Automatic advance to the playoffs. And in the playoffs, if you win, you automatically advance to the next round of the playoffs. Eliminate the playoff point format. It's confusing. Why we do playoff points and regular season points, I think it's unnecessary. Playoff seeding, still 16 drivers make the playoff. Automatic entry into the playoffs with a win. Seeding based off regular season points. But we still have an emphasis on wins because there's more weight in winning the race in the actual points. The playoff format, 10 races in what we call the playoff, and the championship race is separate. So we make the regular season 25 races, the playoffs 10, and the championship 1. Points never reset in the playoff. Winning, you advance to the next round. 6 drivers eliminated after the first round, the first 4 races. 6 drivers eliminated after the quarterfinals, 4 races. 2 drivers eliminated after the semifinals, 2 races. And then the top 2 drivers advance to the championship, 1 race, highest finisher wins it all. I think we have less gimmicky and less uncertainty by getting the top 2 competing for a championship, and the highest finisher of the 2 wins the title. And that's how I determine a champion. What do you think about me fixing the NASCAR playoffs here, Dom?
I think there could be some argument for that. I think the one thing I would tweak, where everyone's going to have an opinion on this, you have that emphasis on winning, maybe a blend of both, where it used to be the top 10 in points were guaranteed, and then 11 through 20 if there were victories. You remember that format from 2011 to 2016? You can keep that, keep 16 drivers in, but the top 10 are guaranteed. So your 6 winners, 11th on back, are still able to make the playoffs, but that way it puts an emphasis on winning, but also an emphasis on points. But going back to Ferris's original question, no, don't change it. NASCAR Twitter is going to complain either way. Fans are going to complain either way. And I think there's some good cases that fans and the drivers and former competitors have made with this one way or the other. Of course, you have somebody like a Chase Elliott who's consistent throughout the year that would like to see this change back to the 2003 format, but a Joey Logano who would not want. So you're going to get varying opinion based on how the system has worked for or against a driver over time. But I think at the same point, the fans, there's been a lot of noise about this one. And I think it would be really cool if NASCAR doesn't change anything. Fans have said for a long time, put an emphasis on winning. NASCAR has done that the last 11 years. Don't change it. Keep it as is. They're going to still tune in whether you change it or not. That's my opinion on it.
I see where you're coming from, and I look at it as, Dom, I want the playoffs to stay. I don't want to go back to the 2003 format. Everybody talks about, run a regular season championship and all that. Yeah, because things were so great when Matt Kenseth walked away with the title. Yeah, that was real good. And then, NBC, they spend all this money to have the playoff, and you're just going to eliminate the playoff. Yeah, that's not going to fly. That's not going to work. With that said, I think that you have to have a postseason format of sorts. I think that they have a good foundation. It just needs to be tweaked a bit. That's what I'm looking at. It's just
Yeah.
tweaks to find ways to make it better. Just like when we complain about football, I wish the NFL playoffs, for example, there's no reason why all the division champions should get a first round playoff game. Should get a home game. You finish, 9 in the NFC South, and you're getting to host a playoff game over a team that won 12 games and was a wild card. To me, that's messed up. I'd like to see that change. But that's a tweaking. I think there's a difference between Dom, overhauling and tweaking. And I think
Yes.
that the playoff format just needs a little bit of tweaking is what we're asking for, not an overhaul, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a blend of both worlds. You can keep the system you have in place. You have the foundation already. It's just making the building better. Like how when a skyscraper needs a little bit of maintenance, you tweak some things. You make sure you don't have to eliminate the entire building. You just fix it and you make it better and you build upon it.
Yeah, exactly. Dom, we got to get out of here in just a moment, but real quick, what's going on with you this weekend, man?
Man, this weekend will be a nice home game with some family time, and man, not any trips on the road anytime soon to go cover some NASCAR. I tend to backload the schedule for that, so it'll be a lot of playoff coverage for me and our team at the Racing Experts. We're going to have our Ryan Kemna out at the track this weekend, who's expected to join us next week here on Let's Go Racing. So we'll have some more insight on that. But nonetheless, it's going to be a fun weekend. Just some nice family time. It's much needed. How about you?
Just back at home, just enjoying myself after a week on the road in Phoenix. And this is my last off weekend till the end of January or February, depending on how the football season plays out. So I will soak it all in with just relaxing before the NFL preseason begins. I guess I'm off Labor Day weekend, but it's pedal to the metal from here on out with the start of the football season. So I'm going to enjoy it and take it all for what it's worth.
You're going from pace laps to 200 miles an hour.
Exactly. We'll put the checkered flag out in this edition of Let's Go Racing. Subscribe to the show. New episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Hit us up on social media at Star Podcasts and Facebook and X. Also by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. For Dominic Aragon, I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.